Good morning, Year 8. Mrs. Roberts, Year 8. I'm obviously not Mrs. Roberts. It's Mr. Bowman here. I remember having you not that long ago for a lesson. I think we did some fraction work together, if I recall. Seems a long time ago now, actually, thinking about it, with all that's happened. Anyway, I'm going to be looking after your lessons for the next 3 weeks. And I'm going to do what Mrs. Roberts would have done if she was taking the lessons. Um, all year 8s are basically doing the same thing. From this point on, we're not going to teach you any new stuff now until hopefully we get back after the holidays. Fingers crossed, we'll see. But in any case, we thought what we'd do is we'd go over some of the stuff that you did earlier in the year. It's very important when learning to keep revisiting things that you've done, especially in maths, because if you don't do that, then you just forget it all and you just go around in a vicious circle, never really learning new stuff. So this is our chance to have a look back at something that you did earlier in the year. So we're going to do a different thing each week, and this week we're going to do algebra. So for today, I've got a nice simple set of questions for you to try involving the very start of learning how to do algebra properly. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by talking a little bit about what algebra is and why we need it. Don't worry, I won't go on for too long. Now, you probably, when you see the word algebra, you're probably thinking, oh, that's when you get letters. For example, the letter T in maths. Now, at primary school, the idea of using a letter in maths would be like a bit strange. Why on earth would you use a letter? We've got numbers. Maths is about numbers, and that's what the language of maths all revolves around, is being able to work with numbers, add them, subtract them, times them, and yet get them to solve problems for you. Well, it turns out that it's actually very useful sometimes to use a letter instead of a number when you want to make it possible for the number to change in a certain situation. So for that reason, we use letters when we don't want to specify what the number actually is, and we want it to be able to change, perhaps, or maybe not change, but I don't know what it is straight away, and I have to do some working to find out what it is. So for that reason, it's useful to use letters. So that T there, when you see it on a page in maths, you've got to think of it as hiding a number behind it. Now that number might change over time, but there's a number associated with that particular letter. And if I have a different letter, S say, then that's got its own number hidden behind it. It might be the same as that one. They could both be 5, but it could equally be a completely different number. Okay, so I could have several letters. So I've got a T, an S. Let's have a U, and let's have a V. So there are my letters, which are all standing for different numbers. Okay, but I don't know what they are, or I don't want to say what they are at the moment. So all algebra is having letters that are standing for numbers that you don't know. And once you've done that, you can then start to do things with your letters that are the same as what you do with the numbers. For example, I can add a couple of letters together, and it's exactly the same as adding a couple of numbers together. I just don't happen to know what the numbers are, okay, or I don't want to say. So, I mean, you'll be happy if I told you that T was 5 and I told you that S was 4. You'd probably be quite happy to agree with me that this thing here is equal to 9 because it's 5 plus 4. So that's 9. Okay, but if I don't tell you what T and S are, or I don't want to say say that they're an actual number, then I could still write down T plus S, and it would still mean adding whatever T stands for to whatever S stands for. Okay, so that's what algebra is about, really. Okay, very basically. So now T plus S is one thing you could do. Another thing you could do is you could maybe times T by itself. So I said T was 5. So, for example, so I could talk about times in T by itself. Now in algebra, we could write TT, which is short for T times T. There's also another way of writing T times T, or TT, and that is to write T with a little 2 there, like that. And you've probably recognized this as meaning squared, T squared. Won't worry about why it's called that now, but these are all the same thing. And if T was 5, all of these would be 25, because 5 times 5 is 25. So that's what algebra's about. Oh, one more thing. You could have something like T plus T plus T, okay, which is just adding T to itself 3 times. But another way of writing that is just to write 3T. Okay, so 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15. 3 times 5 is also 15 if T was equal to 5. Okay, so what do you need to know? Well, for today's lesson, you need to know that when we write algebra, we write it using letters, as we've said. And if I was to write down something with algebra in it, tell you what, let me just put a little heading here. I'm going to introduce a new word, expressions. You see, in algebra, when you write something like T plus S, you are writing an expression. So that's an expression. Okay, it's a fancy word, but it just means you've written some algebra on the page. We don't use the word when we're just writing sums. So if I'd written 5 plus 4, technically it's an expression, but I would just say, oh, it's just a sum, a calculation that you've got to do. But when there's algebra involved, we call it an expression. Okay, so that's an expression. Here's a couple more for you. 3 lots of T plus 4 lots of S. Okay, that's an expression as well. So is T squared plus 5S. That's an expression. I can have a minus sign if I want. I could have T minus S squared. All of these are called expressions. Okay, so these are all expressions. And when you look at an expression, what you're looking at are some bits of algebra separated with plus and minus signs. Okay, and the things either side of the plus or minus sign are called terms. So that there and that there are called terms. Okay, so that's a term and that's a term. There are 8 terms that you can see here. Now, when we have got the expression as simple as we can, each of the terms will be of a different type. So this is called a T term. This is called an S term. That's a T term as well. That's an S term. That's called a T squared term. That's called an S term, a T term, and an S squared term. And once you've got it so that you can't do anything else with the algebra, we say that it has been simplified. So all of these are as simple as you can get them to be. Okay? Now, if you start with something where you can actually make it simpler, then you've got the basis of a maths question. And that's what today's topic is about. We're going to be doing work on collecting like terms. And I'll start you off with a couple of very simple examples before I show you your questions for today. Okay, remember you have done all this with Miss earlier in the year. So for example, if I said to you, G plus, I don't know why I've suddenly started using G. I've been using T, S and U and V, and now I've suddenly gone to G. But it doesn't matter. G plus G plus G plus G plus G written like that, is an expression. It's got 5 terms in it. They're all G, but they're all the same type of term. They're all a G. So I can put them together to make a single term, which would be 5G. Does that seem simple enough? Okay, so I've got G plus G plus G plus G plus G. That would be 5G. Okay, sometimes you can have numbers in front of the G. So I could have a 2G, a 4G, and a 5G. 3 terms. But again, I can just write them as a single term, and that would be 11G. Because I've got 2 there, 4 there, 5, that's 11 in total. So 11G. Okay, hopefully those are nice and simple and you understand those. Now where it gets more interesting is when I have 2 letters in the same expression. So I could have a G and a H and a G and a H, and then, oh, I don't know, let's have 2 extra G's on the end like that. Okay, again, I've got an expression. It's got 4 terms in it, but some of the terms, actually it's got 5, I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sorry. And some of them are the same type. Some G's and some H's. So I can collect all the G's together. G, G and 2G. That's 4 G's in total. And I can collect all the H's together. And there are 2 H's there like that. Okay. And so far, I've only had plus signs in between each of the terms, but I can have minus signs as well. I'm just drawing these lines on to make it a bit easier to see which question is which in this video. So that might help you a little bit. So I'm going to do one more example here. Okay, and this time I'm going to have some minus signs. Something like that. Okay, so this time I've got 4, it is 4 this time, 4 terms, but there's 2 different types there. There's G's and there's H's. Now the trick to doing this is to just look at them one at a time. So I'm looking at the G's now. I don't care about the H's, I'm just looking at the G's. I've got 2G here, and I take away 6G from that. 2 lots take away 6 lots. In other words, 2 take away 6. Now, I think you've done negative numbers with Miss, so you should know that 2 take away 6 is minus 4. So I've got minus 4 G's. Now I do the same thing with the H's. I just look at the H terms. I've got 5H here, and I'm taking a H away from that. Well, that will leave 4 H's like that. Okay, so you're going to be doing questions like this today. You're going to be doing them from this sheet here, collecting like terms. Okay, if you just have a quick look at it now. It's split into bronze, silver and gold. Here are the bronze questions. Now, depending on how quickly you work, it might be that you only get through those today. Okay, my reasoning is it's an hour lesson. You've spent 15-20 minutes listening to me now, so the rest of the time should be just spent doing these questions, and you'll all get to different points because some of you will be quicker than others. All I ask is that when you're answering these questions, you do all the bronze first, then you start working on the silver, and then for those that are really good at this, you can have a go at the gold, which has got some different types of terms in it, some squared terms as well. Just a little heads up, you do not combine squared terms with non-squared terms. So E squared collects with E squared and E collects with E. You don't sort of do anything to put the two together. Okay, that's really just for those that are really keen and doing really well today. Okay, I'd certainly expect most people to get through most of the bronze and maybe some of the silver as well. The bronze, if you look at them, they're all plus signs. The silver introduces some takeaway signs in there as well. Okay, so that's what I want you to do today. Please can you set them out like me, where you write the question, then an equal sign, and then the answer underneath like that. I've also attached the answer so you can mark your own work, and then if you could just turn it in, ideally with a photo of your work so I can see you've actually done the work properly, and I can comment if there's anything about it that needs attention. Well, that's it for today. So have a lovely day, and I hope you enjoy tackling those questions. And of course, if you have any issues at all, you just message me on this assignment and I will get back to you very, very quickly. Bye for now.